Baldur's Gate 3 has a brutal beginning. You start off with limited abilities, low health, no gear, and no resources. You can choose to up the difficulty even further by playing Honor Mode. Only 2% of players have completed Honor Mode for several reasons. Bosses have additional legendary attacks that add to the complexity of the already most challenging encounters. You can't reload saves, which means you must live with each of your decisions, and most importantly, you have a single life. If your party dies, you have to restart from the very beginning, no matter how many hours you've put into the run. Why would anyone play Honor Mode? To get the golden dice. A purely cosmetic skin for your dice, but the single thing that carries over from a previous playthrough and can be used for all future runs. With all this in mind, I'll be volunteering to be abducted and infected by mind flayers to show how I choose to route Act 1 and tackle each of the encounters on the quest for the golden dice. I will be attempting this run as a giant barbarian subclass. Let's go red 40 on the skin tone. Credit to Morgana Evelyn for her frost giant build, which I will link in the description if you're interested. After removing myself from life support, I took my walking health crisis to find some allies. First, I hit the patient next door with a swift palm strike to put him out of his misery. In return, he joined us in the form of a brain dog. Before I could make it much farther, I was jumped by a yellow bullfrog clad in armor named Lae'zel, my self-proclaimed only chance of survival. With a brain dog and bullfrog woman by my side, we pressed on, encountering another patient still trapped in her life support machine, demanding assistance as if I worked here. After nearly giving myself an aneurysm trying to open the pod manually, I found an alien rune to open the pod psionically. Once released, Shadowheart showed not only that racism is alive and well, but also that she's incredibly useful by commanding Commander Zulk to drop his weapon. I made a break for Zulk's sword while Lae'zel managed to snag some void and caustic bulbs. With our stolen contraband, we made a dash for the transponder, making it off the Nautiloid in one piece. After miraculously surviving the fall from the Nautiloid, I woke up on the beach finding myself infected by a mind flayer tadpole, lonely and covered in sand. I dusted myself off and immediately sought to expand my party. First, I crossed paths with a now unconscious Shadowheart. Figuring she must have died from the fall, I went for her loot, only to see she had survived. I woke her up and she proceeded to persuade me to travel together to search for a way to cure her parasites. Being a barbarian with 8 intelligence, I concluded the best decision would be to recruit the racist cleric. Shadowheart and I spotted some enemy brain dogs patrolling the Nautiloid wreckage. To play things safe, we decided to scale the cliff to avoid combat. Just when we thought we were in the clear of the brain dogs, we found Lae'zel caught by the French in a bullfrog trap. I tried to convince the hunters to release Lae'zel, but rather than asking the hunters to cut down the trap, I accidentally said I would cut down Lae'zel. Lae'zel immediately went hostile, thinking all French must be the same, but I still had hope that if I could somehow escape this encounter alive, we could then return and convince Lae'zel to join forces. The only problem was that the French were now coming for Lae'zel's legs. Shadowheart and I were now challenged with not only escaping, but neutralizing the French. Armed with mind flayer technology, Lae'zel proceeded to throw caustic acid on us. As if acid burning us wasn't enough, she called upon the power of the void itself to pull us back into the acid. After an unnecessarily close call, Shadowheart and I managed to force the French to surrender. We split up and fled to camp. I then tried to reapproach Lae'zel to talk things out, but she said no take back, so I fled again, confused and feeling defeated. Instead of strengthening our party, I was mistakenly added to the Bullfrog's most wanted list. We next encountered a man named Gale, who asked me to give him a hand. I obliged his request with a solid high five. Gale specified he would show me a magic trick if I pulled his arm. Without missing a beat, Gale proceeded to ramble some tinfoil hat theory that we would turn into mind flayers absent ridding ourselves of our parasites. Gale suggested we lend each other a helping hand and look for a healer together. I declined to pull his hand after his last magic trick, but agreed to join forces on the adventure. We continued down the path until we encountered a psychotic albino man who introduced himself as Astarion, exclaiming he had one of the brain dogs cornered. I told him to fight that little monster himself, and as I headed off in the opposite direction, the psycho attacked. I pushed him off and he squared off, only for him to lose his edging streak to the tadpole. Confused, he asked what happened. I explained Gale's theory that we would go squid mode if we didn't find a way to get rid of these tadpoles. Astarion agreed to join the party in search of a cure, and with that, we had officially assembled a full party. We now had myself, a barbarian with dangerously high blood pressure, a racist cleric, a wizard with colitis who probably needed to change his robes, and a psychotic albino man. Up the road we went in search of a healer to cure these parasites. Eventually, we hear some yelling in the distance coming from a band of goblins being blasted and stabbed by an aura-farming madman named Will. We ganked the goblins for being goblins and proceeded through a gate into a druid sanctuary to gank Eredin for being Eredin. While asking around the grove for a healer, Will told us about a devil he had been hunting known as Advocatus Diaboli, and we agreed to help each other search if only we had room in the party. Gale finally conceded he had to change his robes from his little magic trick earlier, so we continued through the grove with Will in his place, in search for Nettie, the grove's healer. We were stopped stopped by a bear who hadn't yet received the memo that the leader of the druids, Archdruid Kaga, wished to speak with us. In we went, finding Kaga busy threatening a child for attempted theft of the druid's holy idol. After a little barbaric persuasion, Kaga released the child. Shadowheart then called a team meeting to share that she had a mysterious wound that randomly hurt her and that wolves frightened her. We agreed to keep Shadowheart away from wolves, do something about Kaga if possible, and proceeded to Nettie. Nettie put us in a waiting queue behind a burb only to interrogate us before whipping out a moderately pointy stick, threatening to take us on 1 versus 4 as treatment. After some more barbaric persuasion, Nettie put the stick down and directed us westward towards an old Selûnite temple where others infected with mind-flared tadpoles were converging. The Grove's most powerful and most qualified healer, Halsin the Druid, had apparently been captured by level 1 goblins while searching for the source of the infections. Before heading for Halsin, Nettie generously offered to look the other way while we looted the Druid's secret library, and she even gave us some free wyvern poison for the road. We continued westward in search of Halsin until we heard some distant grunting coming from a wounded man accompanied by 2 others. They told us an owlbear got him. I inadvertently locked eyes with a dying man, and he intentionally locked tadpoles with me, sharing that the 2 were his siblings, and deemed me a true soul since I was able to communicate via tadpole. With his dying breath, he told his siblings to listen to me. Hey. Will demanded we farm aura, and sent the siblings after the owlbear. We followed, and Will ran into the owlbear cave and started viciously mocking the poor creature. The owlbear didn't take too kindly to Will's choice words and called its mate as backup to jump Will. To make things fair, we jumped in to cover Will's back. While Will kept talking shit, Astarion climbed a ledge and started raining sneak attacks. Shadowheart tricked the owlbears with an illusory copy of herself, and I swung my fiery sword until we cleared 2 adult owlbears. Surrounded by dead cultists and owlbears, Will decided we had farmed enough aura and we fled the cave, sparing the owlbear cub. After the Owlbear Encounter, we turned into camp to get some rest. My sleep was short-lived, however, as I was awoken by Astarion about to bite me. I quickly shoved him away, and he explained he is but a vampire, and if I gave him a little blood, he would be more helpful in combat. I weighed my options and decided this would probably help lower my blood pressure, so I gave Astarion a blood donation, only to wake up not only still red and swollen, but now bloodless. Shadowheart replenished me, and we returned to the search and rescue of Halsin, which led us into a rundown village. A good rescue mission wouldn't be complete without a little espionage, so we temporarily identify as transracial to gain unfettered access to the Blighted VIllage. Now that we have access to the village, we start breaking and entering into every house in sight, looting all of the valuables. Before leaving, we tricked more goblins to release a deep gnome named Barkus, who expected to be enslaved after assuming our race and gender. I transitioned back to assure Barkus I was in fact a Frenchman and I only wanted his boots. Once we finished plundering the village for what we could, we started heading north only to encounter the devil himself, Raphael. Impressed by our recent criminal acts, the devil invited us to his home to negotiate a deal. In exchange for our souls, Raphael offered to rid us of our mind flayer tadpoles. After declining his contract offer, based largely on Warlock Will's esoteric fables about how devils are evil, we set off to fulfill Will's hunt for Advocatus Diaboli. Eventually, we found the target of Will's bounty, Karlach. Karlach explained she was a slave to the Archdevil Zariel and was in fact not a devil, despite protests from Will. She had me at... So I asked her on a date and immediately sent Will packing back to camp. But for our first date, Karlach the not devil asked to go out and eliminate some devil worshippers masquerading as holy paladins in the nearby toll house uphill. Thus, we headed uphill, pushing our way inside past one alleged worshipper to begin some non-suspicious barricading of the interior doorways. After successfully isolating one of the worshippers, Shadowheart commanded the leader of the self-proclaimed holy paladins to drop his weapon. We immediately proceeded to the use of lethal force against the unarmed man at the request of our new non-devil companion Karlach. After eliminating the self-proclaimed paladins, we wrapped up our first date by breaking into the basement and looting all of the valuables. Once we were finished looting the toll house, we noticed smoke in the distance and rushed over to see members of the Flaming Fist, Baldur's Gate's militia, outside of a burning inn. We promptly broke down the door after being told that Baldur's Gate's Grand Duke, Alder Ravengard, could be inside. I split off and rushed in, only to find a woman known as Counselor Floric, who informed us Drow had taken Grand Duke Ravengard westward and offered a generous reward if we would save him. I asked, why ask a group of level 3 strangers to do this, to which she replied I had the heart of a dragon, and promptly fled the battlefield along with her entourage of military might. Astarion said he wanted to loot the place, so he grabbed a new armor set off a body while I ran back inside the burning inn for some camp supplies. I took the camp supplies back to camp and had a tadpole moment with Will where he dropped some lore that Grand Duke Ravengard was in fact his father and that we should save him. While Will shared his stories, Astarion went back to the Blighted VIllage and continued looting. Astarion got his hands on some infernal iron. Karlach chimed in that she needed to find an infernal mechanic as soon as possible that could use that iron to fix her infernal engine that Zariel used to replace her heart. We thought back to the Druid Grove and considered that the Smith Damon may be able to help, so we backtracked to the Druid Grove for Karlach. Once we reached the Grove, Karlach and I took a trip to Damon, while Astarion and Shadowheart went digging around for any dirt they could find on Kaga. After some truly innovative smithing by Damon, Karlach's engine was temporarily stabilized, and we were told to keep an eye out for any more infernal iron that could be used for a more permanent solution. Meanwhile, Astarion and Shadowheart were able to find a note addressed to Kaga, asking to meet at the nearby swamp docks alone, accompanied by a book about Shadow Druid teachings. But for now, Shadowheart was feeling sleepy after spending her spells for the day, so we headed back to camp to see Gale's gotta take a dump, but urgently needed a magic item to treat his colitis. I gave him a locket we received from Arabella's parents for saving her life from Kaga earlier, and he offered to repay the favor any way he could. Shadowheart took him up on that offer and took a rest. Before setting out from the Druid Grove, we heard singing in the distance and approached to find a bard named Alfira who serenaded us with inspiration for our coming battles. Strangely though, after Alfira's song stopped, we still heard the distant singing down towards the beach. We went to investigate, only to find a group of harpies luring a child named Murkon. After failing to snap the kid out of his confusion, we realized the only course of action was to save the child by eliminating the harpies. Despite rolling poorly on our turn order, Gale and Astarion positioned on high ground while Karlach and I rushed in to secure the child. Murkon took his turn to eat an opportunity attack that sent him straight to the Kamui dimension. All of us except Astarion fell for the harpy's lure, so Astarion heroically came rushing back in to try to snap us out of it by attacking the singing harpy. The harpies started tearing into us with multi-attacks, downing Karlach before she ever had a chance to act, luring Gale uphill and luring me into eating an opportunity attack. Astarion managed to resist once again and considered retreating to live to fight another day, but his bloodthirsty nature took over as he attempted to distract with the old scrape and lick combo. Although Astarion greatly wounded the harpy, it came flying in and finished me off before I could ever get a chance to act. Then set its sights on Gale uphill. Now caught in a 2 versus 4 situation, surrounded by harpies, Gale and Astarion had to think fast to keep the party alive. Gale cast a magic missile, successfully eliminating one harpy, but failing to interrupt the luring song of another. Astarion luckily resisted the lure again and went for the scrape and dash combo, fearing the worst. The harpy was in swift pursuit, but Gale intercepted it with a magic missile, but again failed to interrupt the lure of another. Astarion, again managing to resist, took a shot on the luring harpy, taking it out of the fight, turning the tides into a 2 versus 2 situation. Astarion, smelling blood, ran back in for a jab on the harpy, who sang in response. Seeing both harpies locked in song gave us at least room to breathe, feeling safe fighting 2 sitting ducks. Due to an unexpected colitis flare-up, Gale missed his shot on a stationary target 5 feet away. The harpy continued singing, finally managing to lure Astarion. Just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, we tragically learned that harpies can still multi-attack even if they're concentrating on their luring song. It doesn't matter because they're just... Oh man, Astarion fell. Oh, that's bad. Death appeared imminent as Gale was lured in for the finishing blow. Might be the run. The harpy went for the nail in the coffin on poor defenseless Gale. Only for Gale's colitis to throw the harpy off enough to evade the claws. With ice in his veins and mud in his pants, Gale reached his climax, simultaneously finishing the harpy and reinvigorating Astarion. Gale and Astarion hurried down the beach, hurling potions at Karlach and I. Wow. Good throw, Gale. Eventually turning this fight into a one-sided 4 versus 1 beatdown. Karlach and I jumped the remaining harpy, striking it down and looting their nest just in case Gale had another colitis flare-up. We made our way back into the grove, looking for Murkon, who apparently survived. We talked to a French child named Moll, who didn't even address the disappearance of Murkon, but did offer to reward us generously if we stole the druid's sacred idol as revenge for threatening Arabella. Considering we were already on a mission to expose Kaga for threatening Arabella, we considered our purposes aligned. We shook hands with Moll and headed towards the Shadow Druid's swamp rendezvous. Fearing the worst, we decided to engage in a little more drow espionage to see what information and gear we could gather from the old Selûnite temple. On our way over, Astarion volunteered to reach into a spider nest to gather some shopping funds. He has a pair of gloves on, so I don't feel bad making him reach into the spider nest. Just as we were about to set foot into the old Selûnite temple, a bout of schizophrenia hit the group. Our vision went dark, and 3 figures appeared before us within our mind's eye. A disembodied voice commanded us to aid these 3 and search for the weapon, and we would be allowed to stand beside them in its presence. At this moment, Karlach exclaimed, "The strange artifact Shadowheart carried must be shielding us from the voices within our heads." After that brief episode, we proceeded to trade with a goblin merchant, exchanging odds and ends for usable weaponry and gear.
Sell these books to this goblin who's probably illiterate.
We then encountered a bard named Bolo babbling some nonsense to a group of goblins and called him out, which got him sent back inside the temple to his cage. Astarion pressed a goblin named Crusher, instigating a fight until the goblin submitted. From his corner, Gale suggested that Astarion have Crusher kiss his foot. Although Astarion followed through and had Crusher kiss his foot, Astarion was not satisfied. Astarion wanted more. Astarion tailed Crusher and hid in some bushes until nature called. We caught Crusher with his pants around his ankles on the edge of a bridge and gave him a little push to the ground below. Astarion ran over and collected Crusher's toe ring for the coming battles. Following the disappearance of Crusher, we went back to camp to lay low, only to see a kindly undead entity named Withers, with supernatural powers, had taken up residence in our camp. He offered to cleave our spirits back to our bodies, resurrecting us should we die. But more importantly, he offered us an opportunity to change our career paths for a mere 100 gold. Everyone in camp took Withers up on this offer to fix our mistakes from the past. Karlach became strong and healthy enough to tank her burning heart. Shadowheart grew wise beyond her 40 years. Will became charismatic enough to talk himself out of his warlock pack. Gale became intelligent enough to cure his own colitis through the power of his mind. And Astarion became dexterous enough to pickpocket all of her gold back. With Gale commanding the party's last remaining brain cell, he rallied Will and Shadowheart to join us into the heart of the old Selûnite temple turned goblin camp. Here we found the most sane individual of all time, Abdurak, a follower of Loviatar, the goddess of pain.
Who invited you in here, a goblin?
Shadowheart suggested I unclothe and get beat by this man as penance. After receiving penance, Loviatar granted me her blessing should I ever come close to death in combat. We then came across a torture in progress, and Shadowheart asked to take over, so we commanded the goblin torturer to leave the room so we could step in. I tried asking Shadowheart what she wanted to do with the prisoner, but she refused to address the elephant in the room. Instead, she shared she couldn't swim, that she liked night orchids, and went on about how devoted she was to her lady Shard, the goddess of loss and suffering. With no direction whatsoever from Shadowheart, we freed the prisoner, who warned us the leaders of the goblin camp were planning to raid the Druid Grove. We thanked him for this information and sent him on his way back to the Druid Grove to warn the others. Still searching for gear, we encountered a member of the Zhentarim named Rua Moonglow, a trader and part of the Black Network. After taking a look at her goods and deciding we could make use of what she was selling, we noticed we had one issue. We lacked the capital to make a clean exchange. Astarion, our 8 intelligence rogue, began plotting a heist. Roa, with her low pockets, was a tricky target to pickpocket. Astarion was going to have to find a way to fleece her without alerting anyone and instigating an all-out brawl with the entire camp. Astarion spotted a suspicious building when he was digging around haystacks for loot near Wakeen's Rest that he suggested we now investigate. After some light-footed barbarian navigation, we found ourselves in the Zhentarim's local hideout. Using some barbaric persuasion, the leader of the hideout, Zaris, offered to reward us if we've retrieved some cargo that hadn't arrived on schedule from up the road. We agreed and told Zaris we would return in due time. We decided we may not yet be powerful enough to take on whatever force was able to take out the Black Network's cargo shipment, but we were sufficiently powerful enough to set our sights on the Shadow Druid rendezvous in the swamp now. On our way to the rendezvous, we crossed paths with Auntie Ethel from the Grove, being confronted by a couple men. We had more important business to attend at the time, and Ethel's prices were less than generous, so we opted to stay out of the argument. In a wave of her hand, Ethel unalived the 2 men and teleported away. We continued wading through the swamp, incurring wounds by underwater bear traps set out around Ethel's home, and ignored our gut feelings that we were being watched for the time being. As we came up on the rendezvous spot, we saw the tree was being patrolled by mud mephits and wood woads. Astarion snuck up and launched a ranged sneak attack to get things started, and we rolled well in the turn order, with the entire party going first thanks to Gale and Will being alert at this stage and myself and Astarion being naturally dexterous. Will, Astarion, and I prioritized taking out the ancient mud mephits before they could multiply to bog us down, while Gale started setting up a grease trap for the approaching wood woads. Gale then summoned a flaming sphere to both distract and set the wood woads on fire, preventing them from regenerating. After clearing the mephits, we all turned our sights towards the wood woads as they closed in. Will and Astarion started shit-talking the wood woads, drawing them in for Gale to command his fire sphere to ram one from behind, bringing it right into magic missile range, and the other fall to Will's booming blade as it tried to take a swing. With the tree clear of all swamp creatures, I found a new pair of gloves, and we found a letter addressed to Kaga from Archdruid Alis, confirming her ties to the Shadow Druids and giving us everything we needed to expose her when the time comes. We stumbled back to camp to get some rest and get as prepared as possible to take on whatever took out the Zhent's cargo shipment. Our rest was short-lived as I had a fever dream that a woman with a pleasant face, purple eyes, and a calculated voice claimed she was stopping us from transforming into mind flayers. This dream visitor claimed I could save our entire world of Faerun, but only if I embraced my potential by opening my mind to mind flayer tadpoles. When morning came, I shook off the fever dream and pet Scratch in case we didn't make it back, and then we set off up the road with the boys to see what took out the Zhent shipment. After following a trail of collapsed carts, we came across an entire pack of gnolls. The gnolls seemed to be cornering the last two surviving members of the Zhentarim in a cave, who appear to be guarding the cargo we were seeking. I snuck into a bush near the leader of the pack, Flynn, and Astarion fired off a sneak attack, surprising the pack. I jumped out of the bushes in a rage, only to realize I forgot to take my steroids that morning and was as weak as a daffodil with a pathetic throw distance on my pike. As Flynn sprinted towards me, all of a sudden, the dream visitor's idea of using the illithid powers seemed promising. I used the power of the Mind Flayer tadpole to command Flynn to feast on the meat within the cave. Obeying, Flynn and her gnolls turned their sights towards the remaining members of the Zhent as we followed them into the cave. After feasting on the meat, Flynn looked back towards us, and I commanded her, using a little inspiration, to next feast on her own pack, turning her to our side. Gale proceeded to summon a flaming sphere in the middle of the pack. Will blasted one hunter, Astarion sniped another hunter, and I took my daily dose of steroids to send a pike flying at the last remaining hunter. With Gale's sphere ramming down the last hunter, we began closing in on the remaining gnolls, and aiming our sights on Flynn, anticipating her to turn on us at any moment. Will sprinted in to smite Flynn, only to whiff his 50-50, but he was able to threaten for a sneak attack by Astarion. Astarion sent an arrow, only to whiff, leaving Will defenseless to Flynn's incoming onslaught. But Will had already prepared for this situation by setting up Armor of Agathis, retaliating against Flynn on impact, and sending a hellish rebuke that put Flynn right into range for a flying pike. We collectively focused down the last gnoll, collected the Zhent's cargo shipment, looted the bodies, and headed back to the Zhentarim Hideout to conduct some business. We returned the cargo container to Zaris in exchange for a little spending money and a lackluster crossbow. But Zaris did give us access to more secret stock from her fencer. She told us to hurry and shop for what we needed as they were about to demo the place and relocate so they couldn't be blamed for Grand Duke Ravengard's kidnap. Unable to afford the secret Black Network stock, we saw an opportunity as the entire hideout had conveniently already been filled with explosives. With a little throw, a well-placed firebolt from Gale.
Gale, you menace Gale. Why would you do that, Gale?
And some finishing blows from Astarion and Will, we cleared the hideout and gained some valuable items from the Zhentarim. Most importantly, Astarion had a new pair of gloves that granted him access to even the lowest of pockets. Now that we have all that we need to pull off Astarion's heist, Gale enveloped the area in a cloud of fog before fleeing, and Astarion snuck up behind Roa. Astarion began rifling through Roa's little pockets, securing bows, arrows, and all of her gold. But before Astarion could secure her magic scrolls, Roa wandered out of Astarion's reach. Right as Roa realized she had been robbed, Gale lost his concentration back in camp, distracted by some scientific experimentation that was underway, and the fog shroud was lifted. Astarion tried fleeing to camp, but Roa had a firm hold on his pant leg already. With his 7 charisma, Astarion successfully deceived Roa to look the other way as he disappeared off into the camp.
Should I tell her I just killed all of her friends? Maybe not. Maybe that would be rubbing salt in the wound.
To get Roa off of our trail, we regrouped outside the grove to confront Kaga. Astarion, noticing the new tadpole powers, asked for a bite of the next worm. We told him if he got us through this next fight, he could help himself. We made our way to Kaga and called her out, only for the rats in her room to transform into some dirty, barefooted halfling shadow druids. Once a traitor, always a traitor, so we were easily able to convince Kaga to turn on the shadow druids and help us take them out. Kaga began calling down the power of the moon to beam the halfling cronies, while Wrath held their leader in place to eat a wrathful smite from Will. Out of magic juice, and seeing we had things under control, Gale sat out as I sent a pike flying into the last remaining bear, eradicating the shadow druids. Seeing the error of her ways, Kaga agreed to step down as archdruid and allow the French settlers to stay in the grove until they were ready to depart. We returned to camp to let Shadowheart know we took care of the shadow druids, only to be reprimanded for our gummy usage. Regardless, Shadowheart was appreciative that we saved her life back on the Nautiloid, and apparently felt the need to share that her calling was to serve Shar as a Dark Justiciar, joining the elite ranks of her faith. The only thing standing in her way was her inscrutable Mother Superior back in Baldur's Gate. We took a mental note that we would help Shadowheart accomplish her goals if we lived that long.
Thanks for sharing.
And set off back towards the swamp to pay Ethel a visit for a re-up on our steroids. On our way over to Ethel's abode, we came across a sheep, and being the group's certified animal handler, I reached out towards the sheep. With a flash of light, the entire swamp transformed around us as we found ourselves standing face to face with a level 4 Fent user. It was at this moment we realized the 2 men Ethel had dropped earlier were likely telling the truth, and our steroid dealer was most likely a hag. Wanting to avoid his needles, we played things off with a nervous bah and shuffled along the path. We next crossed paths with a stinky monster hunting Gur named Gandrel. Astarion was quick to deploy racist assumptions. We asked Gandrel what variety of monster he was hunting.
Look at Astarion's face, just looking real uncomfortable right now. So, what monster were you hunting?
Only to hear he was looking to capture none other than Astarion himself and bring him back to Baldur's Gate. We asked Astarion for his thoughts, to which he asked to jump Gandrel. We gave him the go-ahead, and Shadowheart held him in place while Will tenderized him with a little smite, cursing Gandrel and causing him to lose a turn. Astarion crept in for a disrespectful bite and shanked him in the shoulder before sprinting off as I embedded my pike in his chest. Will whiffed an open swing, but Shadowheart gave it her all by ringing a bell at him. With 6 HP in a dream, Gandrel hit 2 miraculous critical fadeaway crossbow shots, downing Astarion before my pike was able to find its mark. We helped Astarion back to his feet.
He's just looking beat.
And he explained that Khazador Zar, a vampire lord from Baldur's Gate, must have sent Gandrel to bring Astarion back to his palace. We assured Astarion he would be safe with us, and after our vampire friend calmed down, we invited ourselves into Ethel's home to procure some more steroids to take on the goblin leaders. We returned back to camp to rest up before the big fight, only for a devil named Mizora to appear in our camp.
God's damn devil, get out of my camp!
After a failed attempt to shoo the devil away, she explained that Will was her pet, and that she came to kick the dog for failing his mission to hunt Karlach. With a wag of her finger, Will fell to his knees as he began to sprout horns everywhere. With one final taunt, Mizora bid us farewell and left us to discuss the newest devil in the room, Will. With his chin held high, Will valiantly explained he pacted with Mizora for the good of the Sword Coast, and the only way out of his pact was to have Mizora voluntarily release him.
I don't really want to put my worm together with Will. With the stipulation that this is a metaphor for our brain worms and not our physical worms there. We can beat her if we put our brain worms together.
We can. I'm sure of it.
So we agreed to plot a way to get Will out of his pact, and then turned to Astarion for his input, only to find him lost in the middle of his own power trip.
What happened? Were you attacked? Are you looking all beat?
After touching base with Karlach, we got some shut-eye. Upon waking, I hit the juice and called up the boys to take down the 3 goblin leaders. Before heading inside, we ran a round of chicken chasing to calm the nerves and collect some gold. Before we could leave, we couldn't help but notice the owlbear cub was anxious to leave the camp to join us while the goblins remained. We gave him a nod that we would be taking care of that and headed inside the temple. We came across a captive Volo and persuaded Gribbo the guard to release her pigeon. Volo gave his thanks and slipped out safely back to our camp. With loose ends tied up, we first talked to the goblin priestess, Gut, agreeing to let her brand us to earn her trust. After a tadpole moment, the priestess invited the 4 of us back to her private chapel to take things to the next step. We followed her back to her room, and right when she turned her back, I picked her up and launched her into the nearby crevasse. 1 down, 2 to go. We snuck our way into Gut's room to grab any valuables we could find, and stumbled upon a secret path leading into the Underdark before proceeding to the camp's jail in search of Halsin. Once we entered the jail, we spotted some goblins bullying a captive bear, and being a certified animal handler, I had to put a stop to all of that. Will and Gale immediately blasted the children to ensure they couldn't call for help, while we cleared out the rest of the room with the help of our new bear friend. After the fighting had calmed down, the bear morphed into an old man who introduced himself as the druid Halsin, the healer we had sought to find. After filling Halsin in, he said he could not cure us, but could direct us to the source of the tadpoles, Moonrise Towers, suggesting that this is where we could find our cure. Halsin went on to explain that all he sees is red and he would go crazy on the goblins for us, so we invited him along to take down the remaining 2 leaders. With our newly formed 5-man party, we fought through the jail's guards and confronted the next leader, Nightwarden Minthara. We all grouped up on a conveniently placed raised platform, picking off goblins as Halsin Bear flew in off the top ropes to hold off Minthara. With the goblins cleared, Will ran up behind a distracted Minthara, knocked her out, and took her shoes. 2 down, 1 to go. With only the final leader, Dror Ragzlin, left standing, we decided to play things carefully and split up to attack from all angles. Astarion would scale the wall and take up a high ground position in the rafters, while the rest of the party would take things head on after Halsenbear decided to steal my key and walk into the encounter.
Halsen, what are you doing?
To be granted audience once more.
Astarion opened the fight and took a shot nailing Dror Ragzlin in the top of the shoulder. Without even casting Armor of Agathis, Will sprinted in and whiffed a swing, but I was able to take the Warlock Goblin out with a single pike throw. The goblins started focusing their attacks on Will, nearly downing him within seconds of the fight starting. Halsen, seeing red, hobbled over and clawed another goblin down, threatening Dror Ragzlin in the process. Astarion then engaged the Goblin Archer and won his 1v1, falling back into the shadows of the rafters. As Dror Ragzlin looked to see where the shot came from, I sprinted up and suplexed him into the spider pit with perfect form. With Dror Ragzlin paralyzed from a broken neck and the giant spiders creeping up to finish the job, we turned our attention to the remaining cultists and goblins. Gale casted Enlarge on Will, and Will proceeded to teleport off, cleaving 2 enemies in one swing, leading Gale to prematurely climax. I gave another goblin a satisfying shove into the spider pit below to watch the spiders bit Dror Ragzlin to death, aggroing the rest of the goblin camp. But with all 3 threatening leaders out of the picture, Halsen decided his business was finished here and left us to fight our way out without him. After looting the Goblin treasure trove, Feather falling down to Dror Ragzlin for his loot,
Surely there is a way to Misty Step out of this.
and Misty stepping back out of the spider pit, we fought our way through the remaining goblins with ease. Before following Halsen back to the Grove, we took a trip back to camp to make sure Volo made it safely. We found Volo in camp, who examined us, confirming we were infected with a Mind Flayer parasite, but he did say he would begin researching a way to cure us. Leaving Volo to his research, we returned to the Druid Grove to see the tieflings in good spirits now that the roads were free of goblins and safe to travel. Zevlor suggested we throw a party to celebrate our victory, and we offered to host later this evening in our camp. Further into the Grove, we found Halsen causing a scene by disciplining Kaga, giving us the perfect opportunity to nab their sacred idol to avenge Arabella. Gale rolled in a shroud of fog, allowing Astarion to grab the idol, hand it off to us to deliver to Maul in exchange for a valuable ring. With everything finished in the Grove, we turned into camp for the evening for a well-needed rest break and an opportunity to talk up Karlach. Shadowheart played Wingwoman, providing some liquid courage for the evening. Astarion provided a little more liquid courage and said he was looking for some fun, so I directed him towards Gale since his colitis seemed to have cleared up. I tried to talk Gale into giving Astarion the mage hand treatment, but Gale mistook my kindness for flirting, so I disengaged and dashed off. Will was moping in the corner of the map, unhappy with his new devilish appearance. I tried cheering him up to no avail and left him to have his moment while I went to ask Alfira to get a little music going to get Will to bust a move. With everyone enjoying the piece, I returned to Karlach.
Gods, I want to ride you till you see stars.
After talking with Karlach, we got some sleep until old man Halsen, the early riser, jarred us out of bed. Halsen reminded us to go to Moonrise Towers to find a cure, and after some unnecessary attitude, he coughed up some information on how to get there. Halsen explained that the journey would be perilous as the surrounding lands were cursed by shadow, but that we had two options to proceed. Our first option was to take a path through the mountains, which would be easier at first, but we would eventually encounter the shadow curse. The second would be a path through the Underdark, using the secret entrance we already found in Gut's chamber, which could bypass the worst of the shadow curse and offer a more direct path to Moonrise Towers. Halsen invited himself to travel with us, abandoning the Grove and leaving the druids in the hands of some outside druid named Francesca, and gave us some more unnecessary attitude. After saying goodbye to salty Halsen, Shadowheart pulled us aside to share a memory she recalled about her childhood, the moment her mother superior saved her life from a wolf and gave her a home with Shar, and punished her often for failing. We tried convincing Shadowheart that this mother superior sounded abusive, but she hit us with some Sharan teachings. We were, however, able to convince Shadowheart that it would be pragmatic to get her wound healed that randomly caused her pain. We'll take it for now. Before proceeding to Moonrise, we still had a few bits of unfinished business in the area. First, we paid the ogres back in the Blighted VIllage a visit, who after a little barbaric persuasion surrendered a horn to summon them in battle if need be. Next, we turned our sights to the Hag to re-up our steroid supply, but Astarion suggested she must be hiding some farmer-grade products somewhere.
What are you hiding?
So we made a break for her basement. After a look around Ethel's basement, we decided she must be cooking the good stuff even further into her lab. With some more barbaric persuasion, Ethel's door victim agreed to let us delve deeper. On the other side of the door, we encountered 4 people who attacked us on sight, appearing to be experiencing trinsomnia, but signifying we must be on the right track. With a sneak attack from Astarion, a couple magic missiles from Gale, and an Eldritch Blast from Will, we were able to help the Trin addicts get some sleep. With the way forward riddled with noxious DMSO gases, Gale casted Featherfall and Enhanced Leap to let us hurl ourselves all the way down to Ethel's lab. Everyone split up to look for anything we could find, only for Ethel to bust us sneaking around.
Busted!
Ethel immediately summoned 5 illusory copies of herself, bringing things to a 6 versus 4, but Gale with his high intellect discerned which one was real based on the real one having the Fey Life condition. Gale sent magic missiles flying, taking out 4 copies but triggering Ethel to summon another copy, bringing things to a 3 versus 4 situation. With a flying pike and an Eldritch Blast from Will, we were able to single out the real Ethel. Ethel tried to trick us one more time by disguising herself as Mayrina, but Big Brain Gale was able to eyeball the real Mayrina as being 2 kilograms heavier since she was pregnant. Being extra cautious, Gale had the genius idea of sending 1 magic missile at the suspected real Mayrina and the rest at Ethel. Will teleported to Ethel, and although he whiffed his booming blade, he was threatening Ethel, which allowed Astarion to send in a sneak attack, which also whiffed. This sent me into a rage, and I sent my pike flying at Ethel, which did connect. Ethel clawed Will, eating some retaliation damage from his Armor of Agathys, which caused her to viciously mock him about his failed relationship with his father. But Will didn't fall for her petty insults, recasting Armor of Agathys but triggering another illusory copy, which Gale was able to quickly dispatch. Astarion kept whiffing sneak attacks, but my pike flew true, dealing consistent damage to Ethel. Ethel summoned in another 4 illusory copies, and Gale was now out of magic missiles to easily clear the field. Will sent out an Eldritch Blast while I chugged a speed potion to get more throws, allowing me to burst damage the real Ethel into negotiations right before her copies began to hold Astarion and Gale in place. Ethel waved the white flag, begging for her life, offering to give us power in exchange for letting her leave with Mayrina. With a bit of guidance from Will, we were able to barbarically persuade Ethel into setting Mayrina free and giving us a piece of her hair to permanently increase our power. Remembering Astarion asked for her power earlier, we gave Astarion Ethel's hair of dexterity. While Astarion choked down Ethel's hair, Mayrina chewed me out, yelling that she wanted to trade her unborn child to have her dead husband revived before she ran outside. After looting Ethel's lab and finding a magic wand, we regrouped with Mayrina outside, mourning her dead husband. We then used Ethel's magic wand to revive Mayrina's husband Connor, and awkwardly gave her the wand and sent her on her way back to Baldur's Gate with her zombified husband. While Astarion sorted his new powers out, I went to talk to Karlach, only for her to call my bluff about cooling her down.
Am I supposed to do something right here? Is there something I can do here? Grease her up? I don't really want to shoot her with an arrow of ice. That would be crazy.
With his last bit of magic juice, Gale sent a ray of frost at her, which allowed us to have a moment. With that, Karlach joined in for Gale, and we departed on a mission to extract the owlbear cub from the goblin camp. Karlach immediately went into a rage and took up the front line, cleaving anyone that came close. Astarion and I took up high ground, attacking from a range while Will and Karlach guarded our ladder. One by one, we eliminated each and every goblin in camp that made the owlbear cub anxious, opening the path back to our camp for whenever he was ready to join. Reveling from the excitement from the goblin slaughter, Karlach asked to double down and get fired up with a soul coin. She agreed to wait until the time was right to make sure she wasn't overheated before bed.
Roasted dwarf belly.
Feeling more powerful than ever, we returned to camp to get some rest before pressing forward on our journey. Astarion was preening his hair, staring into an empty mirror, so I approached and tried to cheer him up by describing his face for him while also trying to avoid giving him the wrong idea.
I don't want to cook him, but I also don't want to hit on him. So I guess I'll just stare at him and take in the details of his face.
Which I may have failed. Will asked me to be his mirror next, and after accidentally giving Astarion the wrong idea, I played it safe.
Will, you're a freak of nature. Gods. But you're hideous.
But Will took it on the chin, taking it as an opportunity to motivate him to get stronger so everyone would see him as the Blade again. I avoided Gale before he could ever even ask to be his mirror and went to sleep, only to be stricken with another fever dream. The dream visitor lectured me on tadpoles and how the infected hear the voice of the Absolute and believe it to be their god. She explained true souls are the higher ranks of the cult of the Absolute and carry a tadpole to receive their orders. The dream visitor went on to explain she was protecting us from transforming into mind flayers and how she was also infected with a mind flayer parasite. Before letting us get back to sleep, she said we need to work together to take down the Absolute. With our sights now set on fighting the Absolute, we set off towards the mountain path. But before we could make it into the mountains, a bullfrog man swooped in on a full-grown adult red dragon, blocking our path. We took up position on a bridge to decide how to approach the frog squad.
Now the question is, Is that Lae'zel?
Only to see none other than Lae'zel herself running up to her fellow frogs, complicating matters. Astarion stayed up on the bridge in case things went south, and the rest of us went down to try and recruit Lae'zel. As we approached, Lae'zel invaded our minds to tell us to let her handle things. The frogs demanded we relinquish our artifact that was providing us protection from the Absolute, and Lae'zel had the wise idea to share that she was infected with a Mind Flayer tadpole, leading to combat with this bullfrog hit squad. Complicating an already difficult encounter, level 1 Lae'zel was now in the encounter. But Lae'zel was now neutral, which meant there may still be a chance to recruit our favorite bullfrog companion. Astarion sent an arrow flying at the backline, distracting the frogs and buying enough time for Karlach to run in front of Lae'zel, recklessly cleaving 2 frogs, drawing the attention away from Lae'zel. Will enveloped the area in a cloud of ice and acid, finishing off 1 frog. With a couple flying pikes, we were able to bring the enemy numbers down to 2 before Sarth Baretha was able to swing on Karlach 5 times, full killing her out of the fight.
Oh, jeez. Okay. She full killed Karlach. I don't even know how many times she just hit.
Just as Lae'zel landed an opportunity attack on Baretha, the remaining frog one-tapped her before I ever had a chance to correct our misunderstanding from earlier. Will slammed his pommel into Baretha's neck while she was blinded, dazing her as she fell to more flying pikes. Astarion sent an arrow flying into the dark, pushing Lae'zel's killer right into position for a retaliatory Sparta kick of vengeance. Before we could even mourn the loss of Lae'zel, as we went to revive Karlach, we noticed Lae'zel too could be revived. A second chance. Or third chance at recruiting our favorite fighting frog.
Do we have any ill will? You harboring any ill will when I left you behind? You're just wanting to join forces now?
Putting aside our incident from earlier and impressed with our fighting prowess, Lae'zel pragmatically offered to lead us to the cure for our tadpoles. Lae'zel would take Astarion's place as she guided us to her people in the mountains. As we made our way to the frog nest, we crossed paths with an old lady who asked us to aid her in some tadpole trafficking in return for some spending money. Strapped for cash, Astarion and Gale rejoined the party for some more heisting. While Astarion and Gale robbed the old lady, I rallied Shadowheart to accompany us. We made our way through the mountains until we made it to an old monastery turned frog nest. As we navigated through, Lae'zel and Astarion battled to prove who deserves to be the party's archer, victimizing some drunk lizards and crackhead cats. We continued through the old monastery until I was stopped by some giant eagles. I was able to persuade them into letting us pass, granting us access to a new hat for Shadowheart. We made our way inside the frog nest, and Lae'zel was able to talk our way in past the guards at the front door. Astarion asked to check out the frog merchant's stock, only to find more overpriced goods, calling for another Gale and Astarion tag team heist. Gale accidentally blinded 1 frog, instigating a fight, but between Gale's ability to teleport and Astarion's Olympic-level sprinting abilities, the 2 were able to flee and return until they robbed the frogs for everything they wanted. With the frogs now launching a full-scale investigation to find the thieves, we promised Lae'zel we would return to the creche before it was too late, and we fled to the Underdark. Upon entering the Underdark, another cryptic disembodied voice invaded our minds.
Someone's coming.
You are coming.
After Lae'zel finished hunting a giant armadillo, we pressed forward until we encountered the source of the disembodied voice, sentient shrooms. Setting our intention, we admitted to the shrooms we were simply seeking safe passage in search of treatment. Satisfied with our intention, the shrooms invited us to communicate in the flesh. We continued inside the shroom colony, where we met a mind flayer named Omelium. Lae'zel characteristically wanted to jump Omelium, but Omelium convinced her shrooms may be the cure to our parasite problem. Omelium examined us and found our tadpole to be shielded, unable to be removed by physical means or magical means. However, Omelium suggested we may be able to bypass the tadpole's shield through alchemy, utilizing special shrooms from a magic tower to the southwest. Before we could head over, we located the leader of the shrooms, Spa. Spa asked us to cleanse the dwarfs rotting his colony from the nearby beach. In return, Spa offered to open doors to riches of magic and mind. As we headed towards the beach, we recruited the colony's whitest shroom named Glut to accompany us. With our sights set on the shroom loot, we bit, burned, shot, and suplexed our way through the dwarfs until 1 remained. Glut launched himself off the cliff to take up the front line, only to break his ankles. Before the dwarf could punish Glut for his lack of athleticism, Shadowheart sent in a firebolt, cleansing the rod. We hurried over to Glut to help him up, but he started talking crazy, ruining our trip by asking us to eliminate Spa.
Smooth mind. When you called me smooth mind, you sealed your fate, buddy. If you're so eager for blood, Glut, let me give it to you.
We declined, which sent Glut into a frenzy as he tried to trip us out.
He just said he smelled like placenta. That's crazy. That's a crazy insult.
After that bad trip, we ran back to our sanctuary where Volo had completed his research on our tadpole. Volo gestured towards the stone to lie on, offering to attempt an extraction. Volo reassured us that he had at least dreamt of the extraction process 1,000 times over. I allowed Volo to proceed.
pain.
But Volo backed out to get a more robust implement. At this point, we committed to the process and allowed Volo to proceed, sure that this was the cure. In return for permanently blinding me, Volo kitted me out with a new magic eyeball that granted me the ability to see right through invisibility. Sufficiently sobered up after Volo's procedure, we headed back towards the magic tower until we heard chanting coming from a crevice leading below. I split off from the group to check things out. I descended to find the source of the chanting, a congregation of fishmen. The fish continued their chanting as one of the Fint users from the swamp spawned in, claiming to be the Lord of Murder, demanding a sacrifice. All alone and surrounded by chanting fish, I tried my best using all the inspiration I could muster to persuade the Fint user to allow me to sacrifice others in my place. The Fint users were not on board with my ideas and went in for the sacrifice, but I was able to teleport away and make a break for the exit, escaping to regroup with everyone. With the Fint users behind us, we continued towards the magic tower with Lae'zel sniping out the turrets guarding the entrance. I jumped down some mushrooms growing from the side of the tower until I came across some flowers that had anti-magic properties. I just had to find a way inside the tower now, so I broke in through the back door. After sufficiently looting the tower for shrooms, a new beating stick for Astarion, and a magic staff, we returned to Omelium to try and cure our parasites. Omelium blended a concoction of shrooms
Gotta be honest with you. Tastes like shit.
that caused my tadpole to seize and spasm, growing more powerful than ever before. After failing to extort us, Omelium coughed up a ring and some new boots for Shadowheart to apologize for strengthening our tadpole. Before we could return to Spa, a dwarf woman named Dareth pulled us aside. She had ventured to the Underdark with her husband Balin, seeking to cure his dementia using shrooms. Dareth had sent her husband Balin out alone to forage for a rare shroom called Noble Stock to cure his own dementia. The problem was Balin surprisingly got lost while searching for the shrooms, so we were asked to find and rescue him. After poking around, we spotted Balin in the middle of a shroom minefield. I tossed him a scroll of Misty Step and we sent him safely back to his wife, forgetting we were to retrieve the Noble Stock.
It's kind of satisfying to just watch it all blow up.
We returned to Dareth and purchased her valuable ring to give Karlach. We returned to camp to put a ring on Karlach, but found her overheating, but even in her current state, she kept a cool head. After reassuring Karlach we would find her a fix, we got some rest for the night. In the middle of the night, a familiar friend appeared asking for some food. We had plenty to go around, but right as we were socializing with our new recruit,
Eat more!
Lae'zel hopped over and scared him away.
Run!
When morning came, we gave Scratch his daily pets and returned to Spa. With the rot cleansed, we were named Peacebringer by the Shroom, who opened the Guardian Gate, granting us access to more riches. Spa then directed us to the source of the rot, a drow named Nier who was lurking in the ruins beyond the lake. Spa gifted us bliss spores, greatly empowering us for the journey. Beyond the Shroom's Guardian Gate, Astarion found a new hat. Also, we found a book that contained the secrets to crafting adamantine gear. Since Shadowheart can't swim, we rallied Will to accompany us on the boat ride across the lake and set sail on Gex raft. As we drifted along, a group of cultist dwarfs boarded our vessel. Offended by the dwarf's foot stance, I gave him a shove to the approval of my crewmates. I jumped across to launch a mutiny on the cultists, while Will watched my back, blasting a couple dwarfs to meet their friends. After regrouping on our vessel, we continued sailing until we reached the ruins. Upon our arrival, we were greeted by a bald dwarf slave-driving woman trying to extort us for money. Lae'zel called her bluff, talking our way in with minimal conflict as they backpedaled, saying Nier had caused a rockfall and was trapped with some gnome slaves up ahead. Will volunteered us to fight slavery while we were here, and we pressed forward to assess the situation. We continued exploring the ruins until we crossed paths with a dwarf trader that provided some more infernal alloy for Karlach. Near the rockfall, we overheard a short-tempered dwarf named Brithvar who offered us a job: free Nier and kill him, splitting whatever coin he was carrying. We tried negotiating for half the spoils, which got Brithvar all butthurt, causing him to call off our alliance. Regardless, behind Brithvar, we spotted a chest across a gap. We jumped across to find a path that wrapped around deeper into the ruins. Astarion's loot senses were now tingling, so the two of us split off. We found a casting mold for a shield, suggesting we were close to that adamantine forge we read about earlier. Also, we found an idol of Shar that we held onto for Shadowheart and even a clean set of robes for Gale. Astarion hopped across the scaffolding and I sent him on a ride to the deepest part of the ruins where we spotted the adamantine forge down a broken staircase. Will searched the area for the raw materials we needed for the forge. While we waited for Will to complete his forging mission, we returned to camp to grab our new owlbear friend for a walk. We regrouped at the forge and began following the directions from the book we had found earlier. We loaded the mold, loaded the Minthara ore, and lowered the forge. As we released the lava to craft our new adamantine gear, a massive construct known as Grym, meant to protect the forge, emerged from the lava spout. Though he was just a cub, with a combination of some Colossus juice and Gale's wizardry, our owlbear grew to gargantuan proportions, weighing over 11,000 pounds. We now had the perfect weapon to bludgeon Grym into submission. Here comes the owlbear.
Did we do it?
We followed through the rest of the forging process, getting our hands on a powerful shield and set of armor that would prove invaluable for the coming battles. We delivered Shadowheart the idol of Shar we had been holding to her satisfaction. Feeling the need to repay the gift, she began sharing her ambitions of becoming a Dark Justiciar. So we convinced Shadowheart the first step to prove her faith would be to decapitate Nier, rallying her for the hunt. At this point, Lae'zel was growing impatient, demanding we return to the frog nest in the mountains. To calm Lae'zel, we promised we would return just as soon as we brought Nier's head back to Spa. Armed with our new gear, 2 bloodthirsty women, and Will the slave abolitionist, we returned to the side of the cave-in. Since Brithfar called off our alliance, we saw no issue in thinning the ranks of the dwarven slavers.
I started the brawl by slamming one of the dwarfs into the ground, and Will took this as his cue to go straight for their sergeant, blasting her into the lava before teleporting to the highest perch he could find.
The dwarfs began launching their counterattack, some growing to normal person size, and some trying to play mind games. Just as we were about to laugh at their little tactics, one shot an arrow of roaring thunder at Will.
Why does he have that?
Sending him flying into the lava to melt with their sergeant. As retaliation, we showed them we too could use gravity. I Sparta kicked the dwarf square in the chest off the ledge, while Lae'zel shoved another to the ground below, winding him as she sent in a finishing arrow. We fell back into Shadowheart's guardians as the dwarfs continued to disrespect Will, trying to mind control him while he was already melting. Trying to help, Lae'zel shot the dwarf to interrupt her mind control, succeeding but causing Will to be sent to withers.
Okay, Will just burned to ash.
The dwarves had no idea what to do about the spirit guardians, trying and failing to jump towards us as they whiffed all of their shots. After kicking the normal-sized dwarf in the stomach and following up with a pike, Lae'zel and I took out Brithfar, leaving just a couple stragglers. We ate a couple shots and critical misses, but eventually took out the last dwarfs and the eye that had been watching our fight against slavery play out.
We descended the ladder, rushing over to fish Will out of the lava before preparing to confront Nier.
We set down our explosives, and with a single fire bolt from Shadowheart, Nier emerged from the rubble and immediately tried to attack us. But isolated and on the low ground, Nier was light work for our raining pikes, eldritch blasts, bells of death, and arrows. Before Nier ever had a chance to move, we approached and claimed his head for our shroom friends, emancipating the gnomes in the process. As we headed back towards our boat, we spotted Barkus from the Blighted VIllage amidst the now free gnomes. We stopped to say hello and learned about another gnome named Wulbren that had apparently been taken to Moonrise Towers. Since we were headed there ourselves, we offered to save Wulbren if we find him there, and parted ways. We made our way back to Spa to deliver Nier's head.
Brought you Nier's head, courtesy of Peacebringer himself. Here you go.
And news of Glut's transgressions. In return, we received the titles of Kin Spirit and Life Chanter, along with a new amulet that would allow Will to call upon the Song of the Shrooms. Since Lae'zel kept an open mind to our experimental shroom methods to cure the tadpole, even working with a key, it was now our turn to give her methods a try. Following Lae'zel, we returned to the frog nest in the mountain pass. Lae'zel led us to the infirmary of the nest and approached the doctor asking to cure us. The frog doctor instructed us to sit in the DX Razor, and after everyone took the necessary precautions to tank the procedure, I went to take a seat. Lae'zel was quick to throw elbows, demanding that she go first, but with our protections ticking, I instructed Lae'zel to step aside.
Alright, you're just gonna have to stand back. I'm going first.
I will not.
Alright, make way, Lae'zel. I'm purging myself of this damn parasite.
Skra! I am done with you.
Does she go aggro again? Why is Lae'zel giving me so many problems? Will she just straight up leave the party right here? She's gonna fail these saving throws and then go brain dead. I'm done with you. Good riddance, Lae'zel.
Gustil, assist me. The Istik has turned against me.
Oh, come on. Are you serious?
Lae'zel stood her ground and she started popping off on us, taking shot after shot relentlessly. Shadowheart had been waiting for this moment. She summoned her spirit guardians, radiating Lae'zel and the doctor, giving us just enough room to breathe. I went into a rage at Lae'zel's attempt to kill us and sent 2 pikes into her, bringing an end to the archery competition and crowning Astarion as our party's archer moving forward. Will followed up by booming and blasting the doctor, shutting off the possibility of using the gaming chair.
Can I still use the Zaith'isk? So I can't even use the Zaith'isk, and Lae'zel dies.
Wow. Our party of 3 fled to camp to get Astarion, who thought we were there to talk about Cazador. After offering Astarion to Nier, he guided us back into the monastery so he could loot any valuable treasure we may have missed earlier. Just as Astarion went to crack into the monastery's most secret vault, the world around us froze. We woke back up in the infirmary, before we talked to the doctor, before we prepared for the gamer chair, before we lost Lae'zel. We had the chance to keep Lae'zel. We had the chance to rewrite history and change our future, but that's not what we did.
It just hurts to do, because I know what's about to happen.
We believed we owed it to Lae'zel to give her an honorable end.
I'm done with you, good riddance. That hurt.
experts, except for Will, who stepped out of the way this time to make sure we didn't actually die. Feeling the loss of Lae'zel for the now 4th time this run, we turned into camp to get some rest and clear our heads. In the middle of the night, Danton approached to show he was still wounded from his tussle with Grym. I cleaned Danton's wound, and after getting our party's morale back on track with some pets, we got some sleep. When morning came, we returned to the monastery, gathering ceremonial weapons that opened a secret vault, granting us an anticlimactic Dawn Master's crest. More importantly though, we found a note that suggested there was a rare relic being protected elsewhere in the monastery. With our newfound power to radiate our foes, we returned to the Frog Nest with a vengeance and searched for the one in charge, seeking to punish them for the death of Lae'zel. Immediately upon entering the office of what appeared to be the frog leaders, Shadowheart noticed wolves and fled back to camp to hide behind Mama Kay. Now accompanied by our fearless tiger-hearted companion, we lied straight to the frog's face out of principle, letting Astarion send an arrow into the side of her head with a sneak attack. Karlach went into a rage, cleaving the wolves and maiming them in place. Will already had moved into position to boom on the frog assistant and lock her in place while being able to counterspell the frog leader. Will's counterspell must have got in her head because she took a 200 IQ Misty Step afterwards, positioning herself right in harm's way of a couple flying pikes. All the commotion caused more frogs to flood into the room, but it was too little too late. One by one, we eradicated the frogs in Lae'zel's name. We found the access key to the main leader of the frogs, Inquisitor W'wargaz, on the body of the second in command. As we approached the door to the inner chamber, W'wargaz invited us inside, appearing to be the only friendly frog that had hopped across our path. Sensing danger, Astarion climbed on some shadowed boxes while Will and Karlach mad dogged 2 more frogs just in case things went south. Unsurprisingly, we were jumped by more frogs, but we were prepared. Astarion immediately won his archer 1v1 while Karlach went into a rage, bleeding her frog. Upset from whiffing his swing, Will cursed W'wargaz. Astarion showed the frogs they weren't the only ones with hops, repositioning to snipe more targets. W'wargaz felt insulted by Astarion and went to chase him down, opening a clear path for my pikes to find Will and Karlach's frogs. W'wargaz fought back with his psionic weapons, but we already had the numbers. Astarion was first to break his link with W'wargaz with a shank, while Karlach held the line, taking on the remaining fighting frog, maiming her. Will took this opportunity to farm aura by teleporting to W'wargaz and whiffing another swing just to instigate a staring contest.
Whoever moves first is gay.
Astarion came in with the assist, throwing sand in W'wargaz's eyes, causing him to turn gay. W'wargaz tried to fight his urges by attempting to commit a hate crime by assaulting Astarion. While W'wargaz was distracted, I chugged some Go Fast juice and circled around to take the heat off Karlach before double penetrating W'wargaz with a couple pikes. Just as W'wargaz began accumulating a legion of psionic swords, Will blasted him, providing an opening for Astarion to sneak up and bite his neck, successfully turning the frog.
Turn the friggin' frogs gay!
Not a moment after W'wargaz fell, Frog Queen Vlaakith confronted us, trying to extort us for our artifact. We tried explaining that we were just looking to cure our tadpole, but she was determined to test whether we were friends of the frogs. Vlaakith told us that the artifact we carried was actually an ancient relic of the frogs, an astral prism. She claimed that the astral prism was corrupted by an agent of the Illithid Grand Design. Vlaakith warned us that the one inside would appeal to our trust, but we had to kill them to ensure we prevented mind flayers from taking over the world. We countered that we couldn't kill the one inside because they were protecting us from the Absolute, but Vlaakith yelled we were being lied to and to obey her. Vlaakith failed her persuasion roll, and we told her we would instead free the one inside. As if she wasn't even listening to us, Vlaakith opened the prism, but we took a mandatory loot goblin detour. Once we finished looting, we entered to find that we were not actually schizophrenic. The dream visitor was indeed real and explained their side of the story. Our dream visitor claimed they pickpocketed the astral prism from Vlaakith herself. Our visitor teased that they knew a secret that would not only end Vlaakith's rule, but was the very way they were protecting us from the Absolute. The dream visitor then took a knee as a trust exercise, and we both agreed to side against Vlaakith. On that note, our dream visitor blessed us as we fought our way out of the frog's nest. On our way out, we grabbed an egg to rebalance the frog ecosystem and got closure on the end of the story for a certain scout we encountered earlier. We delivered the egg to Esther to make sure it was properly hatched and raised, and proceeded through the mountains until we encountered a legion of undead. We cleared the undead and located their summoner, who told us Ketheric Thorm, the leader of the True Souls and one of the chosen of the Absolute, had ordered Will's dad to be taken to Moonrise Towers. All paths pointed towards Moonrise. Just as we were about to enter the Shadowlands, an eloquent old man asked us to bring him to Gale in our camp. We welcomed him to find he was Gale's dad, who came to tell his son that his goddess ex-girlfriend offered to forgive him if he blew himself up to end the Absolute. We assured Gale's dad we would find another way.
There's still a long journey ahead. We'll find another way.
But he already started losing his mind and wandered off into the wilderness. Anxious about the Shadow Curse, we rallied Shadowheart to light our way and Gale to clear his mind with a walk. So after failing to cure our tadpole, pull through druidic healing, goblin branding, shroom alchemy, bardic surgery, hag magic, frog technology, and devilish contracting, we pressed forward towards Moonrise Towers to take the fight directly to the absolute.